All right, Second Kings 13 tells us about
13.
trusting in the Lord and God's grace in desperate times. So we had Jehu that turned the northern kingdom away from Baal worship, but not fully back to God, and then still serving the golden cows, the golden calves. And then his son and grandson are mentioned here in Second Kings 13, but this is the end of Elisha's life. So Elisha has served for close to 60 years. If we were to look at when he started under Elijah and some of during Ahab and Jezebel, their sons, and now Jehu and Jehu's son and grandson. So Elisha's been a prophet a long time in Israel when they have never had a godly king. But some of the ungodly kings, son and grandson of Jehu, are grandson of Jehu, coming to Elisha to honor him. We looked at that last time, verse 14, where he quotes what Elisha quoted when Elijah was taken to heaven. So that story has circulated. We are guessing that Elisha has told this story multiple times, and so now the people in the kingdom know what he said when Elijah was taken to heaven. And so we'll see as God gives grace through an obvious godly servant. So God gives grace through his leader. And um, it's nice to know in the New Testament we have one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, and you can go to God directly. You don't need priests, you don't need a pope. You don't need anyone else that claims to be a religious leader to go between you and God. You can go directly to God. If we lived in the day of Elisha, though, we would want to be friends with him. We'd want him over to our house. We would want to, if we had someone in our family that had leprosy, we would say, "Hey, go to Elisha. He can help you." Okay, like the little servant girl said to Naaman. And so Elisha was used to perform many, many miracles. I wrote down some of them and I counted them. I think there's 22, at least 22. We don't know exactly how many others. And so I'll just run down through those real quickly here at the beginning. And I say this because a lot of these miracles were known in Israel. These weren't done in private, these were done publicly so that nations knew that Elisha was the prophet who God was with. Okay. And God obviously gets credit. Elisha isn't a miracle worker by himself, he is clearly with God. Just like Samson didn't have supernatural strength in his own. He didn't go to the gym all the time. It was clearly when God was with him, he could do superhuman things. When God wasn't with him, he's an ordinary man. Okay. Elisha's the same way. We are the same way. When God is with us, he can use us. When we're by ourselves, we're just ordinary human beings. But God was definitely with Elisha, and the kingdoms of Israel, Judah, and Syria all knew that this guy had the spirit of Elijah, and that Elijah and Elisha both had God's power. So how do we know? So only God can use, only God can use. And the first miracle that Elisha performed was right after Elijah is taken to heaven. He parts the water with Elijah's cloak. He heals water so that they can drink it. And then he judges scoffers, the boys that were mocking him. So there is a provision of a lot of these miracles of Elijah and Elisha. It's interesting supernatural power, but God provides. And then some of that is judging. And so remember, Elijah was able to call fire down and kill some of those soldiers. Elisha is able to judge. So provide and judge. This is the hand of God. God provides, same God that provides, he judges. And he uses his prophets in the Old Testament. He uses Christ in the New Testament, right? And so Christ, obviously God, is going to be doing the same kinds of things. So parting water, healing water, and then judging scoffers. That's all Second Kings 2. And then Second Kings 3, providing water miraculously, and then victory for the armies that were going against, I think it was Moab. That was Second Kings 3. Then he's providing endless oil for the godly widow, then provides a son for this another wealthy woman that she couldn't have children. Then when that little boy dies, he resurrects him. And then same chapter, 2 Kings 4, he makes poisonous food safe, and then he multiplies food because the gift to provide for the sons of the prophets wasn't enough to feed them. He multiplies food, 2 Kings 4. 2 Kings 5, he heals, he's used to heal the Syrian commander Naaman of leprosy. And then whenever his servant goes to take something, we'd say illegally, sinfully, in greed, he knows where his servant was. He knows what his servant is thinking. And then in judgment, he causes the commander's leprosy to be on this disobedient servant. That's all 2 Kings 5. 2 Kings 6, the axe head floats that's made of iron. Multiple times he warned Israel of the Syrian ambushes. So it says it didn't do it once or twice. So I'm going to count that as at least 3 times that he told private plans of the Syrian army, which he wasn't there. He told the Israelites where not to go because the Syrians were waiting to ambush them. Also in chapter 6 of 2 Kings, he opened the servant's eyes to see God's horses and chariots surrounding Elisha when they came to arrest him, and his servant couldn't see. He also, same chapter, was used to close the eyes of the Syrian army, blind them temporarily, immobilize them, and then take them to Samaria, where then their eyes were open. In chapter 7, he communicates how God was going to save Samaria during a siege, which predicting the future perfectly. But then in that prediction, that remember the amount of cost of barley and wheat was going to be sold for normal things in the end of that siege. But also he's used to remind the king's servant, you just mocked God. You're going to see this, but you're not going to taste it. And that servant was trampled the next day. 2 Kings 7. And then 2 Kings 8, our last chapter before we see Elisha here in 13, is that he sent this godly famine to a foreign land, and he knew that it was a 7-year famine. So that's 22 different miracles that Elisha is able to perform. And these are some national, some private, but everybody around this area knows this is the man of God. Only God can do these supernatural things. It's interesting if you can compare this with Christ, there's a lot of similarities of multiplying food, raising the dead, healing people of leprosy. So we're getting a taste in the Old Testament of the work and the power of God. And when the Messiah comes, the Son of God, we're expecting him to perform miracles, and he does in a very similar way. So 2 Kings 13, Elisha is ready to die, and this desperate, ungodly king comes to him and honors him, and then Elisha is going to give him some help here. And so this is another miracle. This would be 23, 24 miracles, and then we'll see the last miracles, probably one of the most interesting. All right, so verse 15. Elisha said to him, this is the grandson, King Joash, the grandson of Jehu. He says, verse 15, take a bow and arrows. And he took a bow and arrows. And then he said to the king of Israel, this is while Elisha is last day on earth. I mean, he's ready to die. He's very weak. And he said to the king of Israel, draw the bow. And he drew it. And Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the window eastward, which would have been the direction toward Syria, their enemy. And so when Syria comes and invades, they're always evading most of the time, from the east. And so toward the nation of Syria that they've been in constant warfare with. And Elisha said, shoot, and he shot, and he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria, for you shall fight the Syrians in Aphek until you have made an end to them. And he said, okay, take the arrows, and he took them, and he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them. And he struck 3 times, and he stopped. Then the man of God, Elisha, was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times. Why did you only strike 3 times? Okay, until you would have struck down Syria until you had made an end of it. But now you strike down Syria only 3 times. So Elisha died. That's the last thing that we have that he is used to strengthen the king, ungodly king. But God is still, we'll see this, God is still fighting for Israel and using Elisha the prophet. Verse 20, so Elisha died, and they buried him. Now, bands of Moabites used to invade the land in the spring of the year. Moab is southern, actually near Judah, but they come in the land. And as a man was being in the spring of the year, so they're coming to take likely crops and resources, like you see in the book of Judges and other times when God is giving the Israelites into the hands of the Philistines and Syrians and Moabites to judge them. They're taking their food and they're taking people captive, like you saw Naaman the Syrian doing. All right, so this is a time of year when the Moabites are coming in bands and they're invading the land, and the man and as a man was being buried. Verse 21. Behold, a marauding band was seen, and the man was thrown into the grave of Elisha. Okay, just imagine, right? Two guys carrying their friend, dead body. They're like, "Oh, we got to go fight. We can't let them take our stuff." And so they take this guy quickly instead of putting him gently. Just imagine there's a door and they just throw him in this room. Okay, we got to go fight. Well, we'll take care of you later, okay? And they just throw him in there, and it happens to be the same place where Elisha is buried. Verse 20 21. And as they threw him in there, it happened to be the grave of Elisha. And as soon as the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood on his feet. Unreal. The third, this is the third resurrection in the Bible. So the first resurrection, Elijah. Second, Elisha with the little, and both of those are two little boys. We have no idea how old this man was. And I assume he's fighting age because he probably went out and helped fight. And we don't know why he died or any details about him other than this is the third resurrection and the last resurrection of the Old Testament. Okay. Until we get to Christ, this is the only resurrection. This is the last one that we have recorded. And so we're expecting when the Messiah comes, he's going to be able to perform resurrections because only God can do this. Now, God promised Elisha a double portion of Elijah's spirit. And so I've heard it explained that if Elijah had one resurrection, Elisha's got to have two. Well, Elisha dies, right? And he only had performed one resurrection. Well, this would be the second one. Did Elisha do this? No. Okay, his spirit wasn't there. No, it wasn't anything mystical. It was just God wanted to show, even after Elisha is dead, that this was a man of God. So there were a couple other times where people said, this guy was definitely a man of God. He was a son of the prophet, or he was a prophet of God. Bury me near him, or it would be an honor for me to be buried in the same location of honor. And so this one definitely wasn't an honor thing. This was definitely a power of God thing. It wasn't like probably everybody else is like, okay, if you want to have a resurrection, just go touch Elisha's bones. It didn't happen that way. Okay. This wasn't a shrine and it wasn't anything like we would imagine today. It just so happened this is kind of a by chance thing. But God is showing his power even after Elisha has died and using his bones to revive somebody. That's all we have. And this is the last resurrection until we get to the life of Christ. Now, verse 22. Hazael, king of Syria, he is the constant enemy. He's the one that Elisha anointed as king. Hazael, king of Assyria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. And I think Jehoahaz is the son of Jehu. And then Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, becomes king in his place. I'm sorry, I skipped down. So back to verse 22. All the days of Jehoahaz, but the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion on them, and he turned toward them. Now, he doesn't turn toward his people because they've turned to him. Remember that there are no godly kings in northern Israel. Elisha and Elijah are the anomalies. The sons of the prophets, the godly people, they are few and far between. 7,000 during Ahab and Jezebel's reign of maybe, I don't know, 7 million people. So super small minority of people that are actually God followers, God fears, that don't follow Baal, that don't follow the golden calves that Jeroboam set up. But remember, the kings, the best of the kings are ungodly. Jehu, Jehoahaz, and Joash. And then they're going to have a Jeroboam the second is going to be coming next. So this whole kingdom of Israel are at best, they are breaking the second command, which is to have graven images, trying to worship God their own way, counterfeit religion. The worst is when they are worshiping Baal and other other idols. But God is turning toward them. He has compassion on them. He's gracious to them. Why? And we have an answer. Verse 23, because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he would not destroy them. Now, he had every right to wipe them off of the planet. That no one could say, I am related to any of those 10 tribes of Israel. But he doesn't do that. Okay. There's a couple of reasons. One is Romans 9 through 11 that we saw Sunday morning, that God's not completely done with the nation of Israel. Even to this day, he's not done with the nation of Israel. And then in Revelation, we have in the tribulation time, there are 12,000 from all these different tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. And so God's not done with national Israel, I don't think. And this will be a verse that points us to God didn't completely replace Israel with the church, although in Ephesians, it sounds like, and in Romans 9 through 11, that God has set them aside, God has hardened them, and other language of the New Testament. But in the Old Testament and in the final days, it sounds like God is going to have compassion on them, turn toward them. Now they have to trust Christ in the New Testament. There's no other name under heaven given among men whereby people must be saved. So you're not saved just because you're an Israelite. People in Jesus' day thought that, and Jesus said, no, you're not. And so God turns toward them because of his covenant. And we see that covenant language in the New Testament as well. And he wouldn't destroy them. And then the end of verse 23, nor has he cast them from his presence until now. There's always a faithful remnant. When we get to Romans 9 through 11, there's a faithful remnant. When we get to Revelation, it sounds like the remnant now becomes all Israel being saved, but that's likely in the tribulation time. So God gives grace based on his character, not the Israelites' character, and based on God's promises. And what do we see here in these two verses? These are fascinating verses. God is gracious and full of compassion, so he turns toward people. And then God is going to keep his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I wrote Romans 11 as a cross-reference for you to compare with the New Testament. Verses 24 and 25 kind of go back with God gives grace through an obvious faithful servant. And so remember what Elisha told the king before he died, you're going to strike the Syrians 3 times. He gave a prophecy that sometime after Elisha dies, this is going to happen. God fulfills that which we would expect God to fulfill his promises. Verses 24 and 25. When Hazael, king of Syria, died, Ben-Hadad, his son, became king in his place. Then Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, this is the grandson of Jehu, took again from Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities that he had taken from Jehoahaz, his father, in war. 3 times Joash defeated him. Precise number of how many arrows that he struck the ground, which is why Elisha said, you should have done it more. But he didn't. He only did 3 times. And 3 times Joash defeated him and recovered the cities of Israel. So God is not done with them. And so if you don't remember too much about 2 Kings 13 is in desperate times, but in these desperate times, we have the third resurrection. And then we have how God looks at the nation of Israel. And it's through the lens of his promises to, oh, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's way before Moses and the law and the other covenants. So, conclusion, God's people's unfaithfulness is a sobering reminder of our need to be faithful to God. When other people around us are unfaithful, we shouldn't say, well, look, God help those unfaithful people. It's not what we should be taking away. Like, oh, it doesn't matter if I'm faithful. They kept losing land. It kept going back and forth, and it's super unstable. And people are getting taken out of their homes and being slaves to other countries. The Moabites are coming in and taking crops. I mean, it's not going well economically, financially. It's not going well spiritually. Uh, if it wasn't for the grace of God, they would have been eliminated. Okay. So don't think that we can be unfaithful and God will still bless us. No. When we see how God used faithful prophets, God's faithfulness and the faithfulness of these prophets shines on the backdrop of unfaithfulness and idolatry and gross sin. When we see how God used faithful prophets to demonstrate his love for sinners, it should provoke us even more to be faithful to him. We are God's people now. Don't expect prophets to come. We are God's people now, and he wants us to display his love for sinners now and to be faithful to him in the process. May we meditate on our weaknesses and God's strengths. We're made of the same stuff of Jehoahaz and Joash and the unfaithful Israelites. But God is strong. God is gracious. God is compassionate. This is so we will agree with him that we always desperately need our Father and we need our Savior.